Welcome to the Accomplished Brain podcast, where we share our passion, knowledge, and experience about the brain and health.
Okay, how's everyone today? We are Jeff and I. My name is Andrew Amigo, and we are so excited to welcome everyone to the Accomplished Brain podcast with Andrew Amigo from the Accomplished Brain and Jeff Rose from Rep. So we are so excited to share so much stuff about the brain and what we're doing with our course, software, rehab, and just giving people so much information to help them. And we want to share a lot of stuff. So first, I'm going to just introduce myself, and then and then Jeff is going to introduce himself. And then we have a great topic of neuroplasticity that we're going to talk about today. So my name is Andrew Amigo, and I am the founder and owner of the Accomplished Brain. I've been in alternative health for now going on my 20th year. And I specialize in rehabbing complex neurological conditions like concussions, traumatic brain injuries, strokes, Parkinson's, movement disorders, balance disorders, kids with ADHD, kids with special needs, autoimmune conditions. So with Jeff and I, we have developed our own course teaching practitioners the work that we do called Core Concepts in Functional Neuroscience. And also, in addition to that, I have just developed a revolutionary software for brain injuries for practitioners, for them and their clients. We have 6 brain programs. We have 2 virtual reality, a virtual reality, vestibular virtual reality eye program, a 2D eye program, a breathing program, a visual motor imagery for dyslexia, chronic pain, famine pain, and a sound program. So, and with the uniqueness of this software is that the software is built in Unity, all the brain programs, and the software, the other part of the software, the dashboard, sits on Oracle's cloud. So it's unbelievable. And on the dashboard controls all the settings. So the practitioner has the flexibility to design a very customized program, move the data over to the phone, which we're on Apple, iOS, and Android. We have an app with 6 brain programs, and all the clients have to do is log in to press play, and they have a very customized program. So I'm excited to share so much information, and I'm excited to do this podcast with Jeff. Jeff owns his own gym. Jeff does sports training. He does physical rehab, and he does neurological rehab. Jeff is he's an outstanding person. I'll share that. He's a great, caring, energetic person, and he's an outstanding practitioner, always learning, very smart, very caring, and he gets really good results. So I want to let Jeff introduce himself as well.
Sure. So my name is Jeff Rose. I'm the owner and founder of Rep Athletics in Larchmont, New York. I'm a posturologist as well as a neurotherapist. I've had 8 years under an osteopathic curriculum, 5 years under Andrew Amigo at the Accomplished Brain, and I'm also certified as a brain coach from the Amen Clinic. And one thing we're going to talk about today is the concept of neuroplasticity, which by definition of the Webster's Dictionary is the brain's ability to change and expand over time through demand. And what we're going to do today is, through our course and through Andrew, we're going to kind of walk our way through neuroplasticity and what it is in our terms, so on and so forth. And I think it's important to know that neuroplasticity has been described in a lot of different ways. And you have people like neuroscientist Andrew Huberman, who talks about it in regards to neurons and synaptic responses. But I think Andrew has really dialogue this out in a really interesting way of what neuroplasticity is at a molecular level.
Okay, great. So yeah, I wanted to, thanks, Jeff. I think that was very well said, and that was really good. So what I want to do is share in deep terms, but then in very simple terms of really what's going on in neuroplasticity, and look and explain and I'll explain what our therapy really is all about. And when you can explain that, it's pretty amazing. So what let me I'm going to take in, and Jeff, this is okay for us to share our screen.
For sure.
Okay, so I'm going to share this screen, and this is from our manual from our course. Um, and I want to first talk about the what's happening. Uh, Let me go into this. Let me go. Oh, here we go. Okay, so what happens in a nerve is the nerve. It's really interesting. Is the nerve has energy inside and outside the cell, right? And what happens is usually there's sodium so there's potassium that sits outside the cell, and there's sodium. I mean, the potassium is inside the cell, and that's your K, right? And then there's sodium that's sitting outside the cell, and what happens is you have depolarization, and what the depolarization means is the way the nervous system reacts is you have a receptor, right, like an antenna, like an electrical, and that when you get an activation, a neuron gets activated, right, they'll have that will cause an electrical charge or energy, and that causes the um, sodium to go into the cell, and the potassium to come out of the cell, right?
Mhm.
And what happens is up here, you'll see that when the nerves fire at an appropriate rate, they rest, right? They come down to a resting stage. And when they fire, they get to like 100. The neurons start to fire, they last a bit along, and then they die out, right? And then they come back down to a resting level. What happens when people have some kind of abnormal firing, or some kind of, like, they get like a head injury, whether it's a traumatic brain or a concussion, they start now to they can it's very difficult for those neurons to get back to a resting state of negative 65. So that means that you see how nice and then when it fires up, and then it lasts a little bit, and then it comes back, and then it finally, comes back, it dies out, and then it comes back to rest, right? Well, when you have these head injuries, they alter the firing, and they alter the ability to come back down to a rest state. So what happens is the neurons are always at this heightened state of very close to threshold of firing. And when they're very close to the threshold of firing, right, they will fire very rapidly and then die out very fast, and they fatigue, right? So what happens is that when you see that start to happen, you'll start to see that at the cellular level, these neurons will start to lose connections. And when they lose connections, they start to develop abnormal function. So then let's relate that to an area of the brain with memory. When they lose the abnormal firing in the hippocampus or the frontal or the parietal lobe, they'll lose short-term or long-term memory. If they come into their balance centers, their vestibular system, they start to lose, their balance starts to decrease. If it gets in, if this abnormal firing happens, and these and what happens is they lose connections in the frontal lobe, their motor function will start to inhibit. So they'll see that they'll have their gait patterns will be off, their posture will be off. So the thing is that we know from 30 years ago, based on the research, that we can with the right exercise and stimulation, we could remodel that pattern and get the nerve cells to come back to a resting state. We could get the nerve cells to basically fire normally, and they could get this picture to happen again. We could get the nerve cells to start to make more connections. And the more connections they can make, That's the neuroplasticity, right? And we're going to talk about what goes into that. And once they start to make more connections, they start to make neuroplasticity. They start to get the brain, the circuits to change, and they start to get to change. What happens is over a long period of time of neuroplasticity, once they get that over a long period of time, they develop long-term potentiation. And the difference, the explanation of long-term potentiation is if I give you a simple eye movement, I give you a simple balance exercise from our software, right? If I give you that 4 times a day, every time that I give you that exercise, you'll see that your balance will be better, or your eye movements will be better, or your gait, your walking pattern is better. Long-term potentiation. So that's plasticity. I give you that, the circuits change, the function changes. Now, if I do that enough times, we start to develop plasticity where we develop long-term potentiation, LTP. When we develop LTP, what that means is now I don't have to give you the stimulation as much, but the changes still are there. So an example is, just say I gave you 4 times a day, and in about 10 days, we start to within about 3 or 4 days, we start to see every time you do the exercises, they change. Well, then say about 10 days or 1 month, you don't have to do the exercises 4 different times a day. You might have to only do them twice a day. And you're still seeing the same result. The balance is better. The walking pattern is better. So I'm going to go into why this is happening. And I'm going to show you based on, let me go back to our course here. Okay. So this is what happens with the cell. This is at the cellular level. Okay. The way our nervous system works is we have some sort of activity, and that activity activates a receptor. We have different receptors. All they are is a receptor, is like an antenna that's sending electrical charges or information, and they're sending it through a pathway. Like if I want to go I live in New Jersey and I live in Edgewater, and I want to go to Whole Foods, which is in Edgewater, I have a path that I take. It's the same thing. You get in the car, it's the same thing. You do the exercises like you get in the car and you follow the path, right? And then it gets easier to follow. It's the same way. It's the same thing. You do some kind of exercise, an eye movement. You could do a vestibular balance movement. You could do a sound movement. You could do a breathing exercise. And those exercises activate certain receptors. So if you do an eye movement, first of all, you're activating your visual system. So you're using photoreceptors, right? And then you're activating receptors that move the eye, right? Then you're activating your vestibular system when you're doing balance work or vestibular therapy, right? So you're activating those receptors. When you activate those receptors, you also activate on the cell level an AMPA receptor. This AMPA receptor will also activate on the cell an NMDA receptor. And on that NMDA receptor, there's certain chemicals that get activated: glycine, polyamine, and glutamine. When you do that, you also unplug magnesium from the cell and you allow calcium into the cell. Okay, when you allow calcium into the cell, basically what happens is you you do some kind of eye movement, or you do an eye movement and you activate a photoreceptor. That's going to activate an AMPA receptor, an NMDA receptor, and then these three things happen on the cell called glycine, polyamine, and glutamine. What happens is they allow magnesium to unplug itself and allow calcium into the cell. When you get calcium into the cell, if you do that enough times, so if you do that 3 or 4 times a day over a 7 to 10 day period of enough calcium coming in, because you're doing it 4 times a day, the calcium stimulates the nucleus of the cell to make a protein. And these proteins, okay, called C-phos and C-Jun, and those proteins activate the energy part of the cell called the mitochondria. Now, the mitochondria, when that gets activated, that's where you make new connections. So think about if you make Facebook or LinkedIn, if you have more connections in Facebook and you have more connections in LinkedIn, you have a bigger network. If you have a bigger network, you have a bigger following, good things happen. It's the same thing with neuroscience. If you make more connections, you improve your function. So if you make more connections in your balance center, your balance will improve. If you make more connections in your memory centers, your memory will improve. If you make more connections in your frontal lobe where your motor pathways are, your movement is going to get better, and your gait will get better, and you'll if you make more connections in your cerebellum, the coordination of your movements will get better. If you make more connections in your inner ear vestibular system, your posture will improve, your balance will improve, okay, and your gait will improve. So basically, it's trying to find out what exercise to give you that you don't fatigue, okay, and that you could do 3 or 4 times a day to allow this whole process to work, right? Now, the mitochondria can also be supported from a nutritional standpoint. So let's talk about that. So fish oils, omega-3s will help. B vitamin will help. CoQ10 will help. Okay, glutathione will help. What's a precursor to make glutathione is a simple supplement called NLC-cysteine. So you could take certain supplements, like you can improve your B vitamins. You could take CoQ10, L-carnitine. So B vitamin, L-carnitine, CoQ10, and NLC-cysteine, which makes glutathione, all will help the mitochondria from a nutritional standpoint. And then if you give the right exercise or the right stimulation in the right area, and you do it 3 or 4 times a day, every 7 to 10 days, you'll start to have the mitochondria start making more connections. And every, say, 2 to 3 weeks, you'll be able to get those changes to stay with less stimulation. So say in 3 weeks, 4 weeks of doing that, right, of doing the program simple, and the program might take you 2 minutes, but you do it 4 different times a day, 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock, right? You just do your simple program. You work with someone like Jeff and I who could give you simple exercises. We have a software that you could use that we're going to show you on this, and we'll continue to show you how some of this works. So, and then over a month, now instead of doing it 4 times a day, you could do it twice a day, and you'll have the same results that will stay. And that's basically neuroplasticity. And at the same time, as we showed you over here, let me show you this. We'll show you over here. This picture starts to go from this abnormal firing, right, to this, back to this picture of the nerve cells being able to get down to rest and actually firing normally. What happens when you're doing that? Your headaches get better, your balance gets better, your memory gets better, your sleep gets better. We're all going to be talking about the different rehab and mechanisms to be able to help you with those of exercises and programs that can help the memory, exercises and programs that can help sleep, exercise and programs that help your balance, to help improve anxiety. But it all comes back down to understanding neuroplasticity. It's very simple. You have an antenna, like a receptor that receives and sends information. That antenna gets activated with some kind of activity, an eye movement, sensory activity, a smell, a balance, moving your muscles, right? They call that proprioceptors, right? The eyes have photoreceptors, and they have receptors to move the actual movement of the eye, right? You have your vestibular receptors when you do inner ear balance work. So those receptors get activated. If you give the receptor in the right area, the right amount of reps, the right frequency, the right amount of stimulation, over doing that 3 or 4 days, you'll start to change the cell at the cellular level where we are back here. Hold on one sec. We're going to bring that up where you could get neuroplasticity. The receptor fires an AMPA receptor, which fires an NMDA receptor on the cell. And then these chemicals happen, which allow the unplug of magnesium and calcium. And it's the right amount of calcium into the cell. And doing that over a period of time allows the nucleus of the cell to develop these proteins, and these proteins stimulate the mitochondria. The mitochondria is the energy part of the cell that allows you to connect to more cells. The more connections you have, the better your function is going to be. Okay. What happens when you get an injury is you start to get too much calcium into the cell. They flood the cell and you start to lose connections. So again, with neuroplasticity, with the right amount of exercise, we could replasticize and change that whole pattern of firing to change the nerve cell to get back to a proper rest, the proper firing. We could get back to the cellular level firing and stimulating the mitochondria. We could support the mitochondria with good nutrition, with an anti-inflammatory diet. We could also support the mitochondria with certain supplements, L-carnitine, B vitamins, CoQ10, and NLC-cysteine, which is a precursor to make glutathione, to improve the connections. And the more connections you have, we can restore the function. And that's what neuroplasticity is all about. And to get long-term potentiation means that you could get the same function with doing your exercises less and less. And that's over a period of time. That's what happens. You get a basically long-term potentiation is like a deeper level of neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity means that we could change. And if we could change at the cellular level, we could change the function. We can improve memory. We can improve sleep. We can improve balance. We could decrease the headache. We can improve your focus, attention, all these things, movements, gait, walking pattern. We can all improve by doing the proper stimulation. Now, I want to show you our software on some things that we can do with the software that we could put right onto your phone. So let's go and say somebody has a problem with their eye movements, and we want them to track their eyes better. Okay. So we're gonna fire up my software. We're gonna show you a little bit about that as well.
So, Andrew, while you're doing that, I just want to jump in and talk a little bit about bringing neuroplasticity into from like a musculoskeletal issue. Like, for example, I have a lot of clients that walk in, whether it's, neck pain or lower back pain. The common thing is, well, I sit at a computer all day and I try to remind myself to sit up straight. Well, the reality is that their brain has kind of been set from slouching while they're at the computer, that head posture or that low back posture is normal. And so we play that into exercise in regards to whether it's a deadlift, whether it's a squat, whether it's a row, whatever it is, or performing Aldoa, is having them understand how to hold good posture during the exercise. And because that's constant activation, and we do that over and over and over again, the brain begins to understand, oh, that's how Andrew or that's how Jeff wants me to hold my neck. And so when you talk about, long-term potentiation, that can never be accomplished from working out 2 times a week with a trainer. We give everybody homework, and
100%.
homework, right, by doing things on your own and doing things the right way is the only way that's going to reinforce. And it takes time. And I think that's always one of the hardest things to understand is there's no magic pill for something like this. It's something that has to be practiced over and over, and exactly to your point, at the appropriate rate or at the appropriate frequency.
Yeah, so let me take that question. That's a great question and answer. So yes, when you're if clients sit all day, right, and their posture is X, and then you want them to get their posture better. So the fact is that they have this job that requires them to sit. So they're going to have to do. So then what happens is the brain is getting used to this pattern of them
Hmm.
sitting, and then the brain is based, because you just think about this. If you think about, the brain is controlling everything we do. So just think about this, that I can have, say, an example is, I can have somebody um, do something to my hand, and my hand, I could, say I hurt my hand, or I sprained my wrist, but I could still move my hand. But if I took the motor strip, like, so in the brain has a representation of different body parts,
Hmm.
and somehow the body part that basically represented the hand, right, was, the brain was affected up in the brain in the motor strip, or the sensory or motor strip. The hand now would be like this, it would be flexed. And I don't care whatever you're going to do, you're not going to open up that hand unless you open that circuit. So what the point of it is, so you're not going to be able to use that hand, right? So if you have a sprained wrist, right, you could still move the hand and use it, and it might be a little bit of painful. So the point of the matter is that the brain up top is controlling everything, and all the function is coming from the brain. So, yes, there are times that you're gonna in rehab, you're gonna work that specific muscle in that area, but you also have to be cognizant of the brain. So with that said, when you're sitting, the brain is seeing that a pattern that's developing, and the brain is firing muscles, and that are now used to firing as a pattern, right? And putting you in a certain position. So now muscles tend to now stay in a certain position, whether they stay contracted or they stay elongated. What happens is, you need to break that pattern by doing some kind of exercise that's going to help at a certain level, whether it's the back, or the hamstrings, or whatever it is, the hip. But at the same time, it's also helping to unlock the pattern of the brain. And you have to be able to do this and especially if you're sitting for hours, you can't expect in one day, one session, one week, it's probably going to take many months to get that pattern where you could sit, and you're going and remember, it's just like anything else. It's just like, exercising is not something you do to get to a destination. Exercising is something you do as a lifestyle. So as
For
long
sure.
as you keep that lifestyle, so you don't just exercise the brain and you do it one time, or you do it for an intense period and then you stop. The brain is like anything else. It needs to be attended to. It needs to be paid attention. So you need to do exercise, but you may be in the beginning of doing very intense, but then after a while, you still need to keep maintenance up, so to keep that pattern up and clear. And a
For
lot of
sure.
people say, well, I got to do this the rest of my life. Well, let me ask you something. Do you, when you go and you exercise and you get your cardiovascular, you do it for 5 months and then you stop, you never exercise the rest of your life? No, in the beginning, when you're trying to get to a certain goal, you might be very intense, but then you're doing some sort of maintenance, and you're always doing exercise because your body needs it. It's just like you don't eat healthy for 3 or 4 months, or 5 months, and then never eat healthy again. You need to be on a maintenance and constantly eat healthy. It's a lifestyle.
For sure.
Okay. So I'm going to share with you our software, and just showing you some of the things that we could do. So we have a software that has 6 brain programs, 22 parts, and we use this software. We put this. So here's the software where we can control the settings. and we could get very customized, and we could put this on somebody's phone. So we have an eye movement program, and just say we want to stimulate the eye or the vestibular system. So this is pretty cool. We can use, if you like, someone likes sports and tennis, we can move the size, the speed. We could have a certain specific background like grass. We could have the repetitions. We could set the number of sets. And remember, all these specific settings, we could actually select the client, we could set the settings, and we sign the activity, and those settings move over right through the web through somebody's phone, and all someone has to do is log in and press play, and those settings are always there. So the great thing is we give the software to practitioners like myself, like Jeff, so they're able to work and develop and have the flexibility to develop a very customized program, but to the client is as simple as log in and press play. Okay. So we come over here and we have a starting position. So just say we want to start up to the right and we want to have them move down to the left. And they just press play and they watch the tennis ball. They have the grass background with the size of the target. They follow the ball. This is a tracking exercise. This is very good for correcting someone's head tilt. Which will help their balance. This is very good to stimulate their temporal lobe, which will help their medial temporal lobe for memory. So I use this sometimes for memory. I use this for head tilts. I use this for focus, for attention. So I use this for a lot of things. So I think in that case, we can have them do an eye movement. Then eye movement activates their photoreceptors as well as receptors that move their eyes. So their eye movements get better. Their eye muscles can strengthen, which is attached to their head posture. So Jeff and I, when we look at someone's posture, we're also looking at their posture and the alignment of their eye. The alignment of their eye, they call that a skew deviation. And skew deviation just means that one eye is higher and one eye is lower. We could use tracking exercises to correct the skew deviation. And what happens is, as a part of a skew deviation, when one eye is higher or lower, they'll tend to tilt their head in one direction or the other, and they'll also rotate their neck. So now you could start seeing that abnormal motion and muscles fire. They can have headaches, neck pain, and they'll have balance issues. So we could correct that all and get neuroplasticity all with looking at their head posture, correlating that with the alignment of their eye, and then giving them a simple eye exercise that they could put on their phone that they could do 3 or 4 times a day, and over several weeks or months, they could start to see neuroplasticity, to change the cell level, change the firing. So now the nerve cells fire nicely. They come back to resting position, and the cellular level, we could activate the mitochondria, which makes more connections, which now that connection, their muscles start to change, and now their head posture from a head tilt from here starts to go here. Their balance now is improved. Their walking is improved. Their muscle, their work with Jeff, their strength starts to improve because they're recruiting the right muscles together and not compensating. Their back pain or neck pain can go away. All this can happen with neuroplasticity and the work that Jeff and I do.
That's great. Real quick, Andrew, before we wrap up, one more thing I wanted to kind of put out there is, obviously nowadays there's a lot of talk with mental health and all that stuff, and I'm sure we're going to cover some of those topics in a later date. But in regards to neuroplasticity and something like PTSD, right? So they say for someone who's suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, there's a trigger, right? Something comes up in their life and all of a sudden that sets them off. So can you just kind of go through that system really quickly and just talk about from a rehabilitation standpoint, how we're going to take them from that trigger sets them off to kind of powering down the power of the trigger.
Yeah. So I wanna talk. I'm gonna bring something up. If it's okay, I'm gonna bring two things up from the two pictures up from the one from our course, and another I want to bring up this picture from the from a neurological book, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So this is going to be really cool. I think they'll really enjoy this, because we're also going to do on mechanism based therapies. That's how we kind of look at it, and we're going to do mechanism versus evidence based, which the mechanism, which we're going to have a whole topic on mechanism. We're going to share different mechanisms, and basically out of the outpost of the mechanism becomes the evidence. And we're going to go into a whole podcast about this, but this is going to be, they're going to love this, because I'm going to show this picture. This is a really snapshot of the picture that I'm going to show. That is going to be tremendous. Let me see. I got it right here. Yeah. 18. Okay. Yep. I got it right here. This is going to be tremendous, this picture. Here we go. Okay. So watch this picture here, and then we're going to go back into our course as well. So we're going to show this picture. Oh, I got my course here. This is great. Okay. So watch this. So if you can look at this picture, you have the limbic system, which is the emotional brain, right? If you take the frontal lobe, and the inside of the frontal lobe, the frontal and the temporal lobe, the inside is where your limbic system, that's your emotional brain. A big part of this emotional brain, especially with the PTSD that gets activated, is an area called your amygdala, right? And that's an area, you could say amygdala, but I mean, it's really pronounced the amygdala. So what happens is the amygdala gets activated with a lot of times with people with fear, right? So I wanted to share that, and that obviously has a bidirectional control over the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain. Well, key to therapy is, there's a couple of things I want to go back to. So let me go back to the front. Let me go back to my course, and I want to show a couple of things in our course, okay? Because this is really some cool stuff. Oh, no, share screen. Let me go into our course. Hold on one sec. All right.
While you're bringing that up, Andrew, you're bringing up the amygdala, and obviously in that picture too, it also shows the connection to the hippocampus, which is
where the memory centers are.
Exactly. So,
Right.
a trigger is something that's going to set off, right, a prior memory.
Right. So watch this. So what we do, and this is why we're mechanism based. Okay, this is really cool. So let me bring this up. Concepts, course. Okay, so I'm going to bring this up. Go back to our course. So I'll go back to our course, and I want to bring up this neuraxis here in our course. Okay, so let's go back into, okay, so let's go back to this picture. So this is a snapshot of the brain and nervous system. So if you see the frontal lobe, like it's right up there, that frontal lobe, and inside of that is the limbic system. The frontal lobes help dramatically. The stronger your frontal lobes are, they help to keep the limbic system from over firing and escaping. So just think about this. When I have PTSD and I have this emotional brain, the frontal lobes are firing abnormally. They can't keep the limbic system the amygdala. So what happens is there's another area of the limbic system called the anterior cingulate, which can get activated with eye movements. So that eye movement called a tracking, so we could use a smell, or we could use a tracking exercise, or a saccade, a still target, which we'll talk about that later on, different types of eye movements. But that tracking movement can activate the temporal lobe, the occipital lobe, but it can also communicate with the frontal lobe. And the more we can get that, and also that tracking can activate, because it's eye movements, can activate the anterior cingulate, which can all help calm that amygdala and limbic system down, as well as using different types of smells. So we can use eye movements, we could use vestibular, we could use smells, or we could use breathing exercises, meditation, all of that combined, and we could do it and again, what we're doing, Jeff and I, isn't something that the exercises isn't something that people haven't seen before, but it's figuring out the customization, the specific exercise, and the specifics on the exercise, how many reps, sets, colors, the if you're using eye movements, what angle that you're going to put the eyes at, where you're going to start the position, the end position, all that can matter. Do you put a background, what type of background, what color background? All those specificities are very, very important to the customization. And the customization, we could figure out that's the unique thing, that specific customization for that client, put that right on their phone, and we can help dramatically help those people with PTSD dramatically. And I'm going to show you another thing we have in our software that is tremendous. I'm going to just share this with you because this is really all tremendous stuff. And again, I thank Jeff for allowing us to share what we're doing. But we have a breathing program which can help stimulate the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic system that will further calm the nervous system down.
Sure.
Again, and we could put this breathing program here. We'll just show this a little bit what we have. Could put this on their phone and they could do this all day long. And over a time period this year, we're going to be putting meditational music into our sound program, and we're going to integrate that into the breathing program. But you could do this. You could have an inhale. You could have an exhale. And basically, we could put the settings on, and as simple as, let me just share this, as simple as all they do is they have the time and it cues you breathing. And we can use these programs very simply to help stimulate the parasympathetic system, to help calm the nervous system down, and to help with PTSD.
Sure. And I think it's important, if we refer back to that diagram you brought up, there's an indirect connection then to the brain stem, where you have the vagal nerve, and through something like a breathing exercise, you're essentially can go through that pathway in order to affect the function of the amygdala.
Yeah, let's talk about that as well. So I'm going to bring that up right over here with that diagram with our course here. So finish course. Yeah, so let me bring this up right here. Is this is really cool. So the brain stem. So the brain stem is so powerful that there are 12 cranial nerves in the brain stem. So the brain stem looks at smell, vision, eye movements. It looks at hearing, sound. It looks at vestibular inner balance, sound, swallowing, breathing, reflex for the heart that could help. So we could do so many things in the brainstem that can affect the autonomics, whether it's the vascular system, we can open it up, whether it's, the breathing system can improve. Because a lot of your breathing, if you look at the brainstem is kind of in this area here where orange, green and blue. Green and blue is your pons and your medulla. So
Mhm.
your breathing centers are in your medulla, right? And your pons and medulla, that area together, that can inhibit pain, that can stimulate your vagus nerve. So cranial nerve 10 is your vagus nerve, and that activates your parasympathetic system. And we could use like breathing, we could use physical exercise like aerobic type of exercise. We could use eye movements, we could use movements of the limb that activate the brain, which activates the cortex, and that will fire into those pons in the medulla. So that can help again decrease your pain. That can help improve certain muscles, recruitment of certain muscles, um, and that can help the autonomics. So blood pressure, heart rate, pulse, temperature, oxygen, all that could be improved with our brain and brain stimulation and firing either directly or firing indirectly into another area and then firing back down into the brain stem can help modulate the autonomic nervous system. So sleep. So, I mean, this is the cool thing that's what we're seeing in our program that we're being able to help is PTSD, sleep, anxiety, and all this stuff in our podcast. We're going to go deeper levels of the mechanism and specific exercise and how we can help these specific functions.
Yeah, that's fantastic, man. I think a lot of this stuff has certainly been around for a long time, but when you've been able to do is kind of harness it and put it in a very practical application, and take someone like myself who didn't have a neurology background and simplify it and be able to put it into practice.
Yeah, I mean, I think what my goal has been is I think there's a lot of smart people. So I want to share with you people out there some things that I'm not going to agree or disagree. I'm just going to tell you how Jeff and I aren't going to be, and I'm not going to be the people who do that. I'm not one way or the other. Um, I'm always going to say good stuff about everybody on here. It's very our consciousness. And so Jeff and I, besides learning a lot of academia, we also come from a very conscious world. Consciousness means that we're very aware of our thoughts, and we're aware that our thoughts drive certain energy. And energy is that's about healing is energy. And then we all bring in academia, right? We're bringing exercise, neuroscience, exercise and neuroscience, plasticity, but we all bring together whatever therapies or trainers or strength coaches together. We bring an energy to the gamma and to the table. And I think for Jeff and I think when we're on here, we're only going to say good things about people, and we want to keep that. And when we have a philosophy, and so one of the things I think is there's a lot of brilliant people out there. There's a lot of incredible smart people who put amazing books together and really deep stuff like that book that I was showing you with the amygdala. That comes from a neuroscience book, a neurology book by a neurologist for Yale. Brilliant guy. I mean, there's so many brilliant people. So I think what I tried to do is with Jeff is put a course together that first I was teaching Jeff, and then through teaching Jeff, we were able to put this course together. Is we wanted to put a course together of what was important working with a client. Now that doesn't mean that you don't read a lot of these, you don't read more books, you don't get more in depth, and our book isn't the only book that's out there. But we feel that there's a lot of good things in there that were important when a practitioner is working with a client. And it's important for the client to see a lot of nice things like that diagram. That doesn't mean we're the end all be all. And it doesn't mean that we don't have good stuff. We have really good stuff. And there's a lot of people that have, and I think teaching is all about trying to meet people at a level and try to improve people's foundation so that they could take that information and they can apply it. And that's very important, is how do you apply the information? Because the
Sure.
knowledge is important, but having to apply it and then help other people get results, or whether it's a practitioner that wants to do this work, or whether it's a client that wants to get better, to learn how to do these exercises or learn why you do these exercises and coach them. And that's really important with our work, is that the application. So we tried to put something together that was complex, but yet we try to simplify it in a way that practitioners can, come and learn this stuff, and they can get the results with their, and they can help their clients. And that's where we're going to constantly always keep it in these podcasts, is we're always going to say good things about everybody, and we're just going to share the way we look at things and how we do things, and we're very open.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, no, it's definitely helped me in my practice, my business. And I've
Jeff,
certainly
can you
been able to.
share like a couple of cool cases, or just maybe an example of a case like that you were able to, that somebody came to you and they learned this stuff, you learned this stuff, and then you were able to provide value with?
Sure. So a couple months ago, I had somebody with like a nystagmus, constant, blinking, and eyes were kind of dancing around quite a bit. And probably 11-year-old boy. And the mother came to me about it. She was a client of mine, and she basically said it really just kind of kicked in recently with school, considering most of the kids are on Zoom nowadays. And I think there's also some social pressures going on, so on and so forth. So I simply in one session saw him, and I went through a diagnostics of, balance, eye tracking, saccades, cerebellum coordination from each side. And basically with that, it kind of gave me a keyhole to see, okay, something might not be firing properly. And from there, I just gave him corrective exercises in order to bring hemisphericity, or to bring balance, right, to his cortex.
And I'll share. Hemisphericity just means that one brain, either the left side of the brain or the right side, is firing. They're not firing at the same rate. So the left brain, will, a lot of the right-sided movements will control the right-sided movements, vice versa. The
Mm,
right brain controls the left-sided movements, and then, with language and speech, there's different things, right and left brain. So a lot of times we're looking at it to see if there's one brain that's off, and we're trying to give exercises. Sometimes, a lot of times, we give exercise on both sides, and then maybe we give exercise on one side a little longer to kind of to create a balance, or help the body to heal itself to create a balance.
for sure, for sure. And so, basically after some cerebellum coordination, one head movement, one eye exercise, and then some breathing patterns. The mom was insistent that I saw him the week after, even though I said we could probably give it a couple weeks. And I'd say probably his nystagmus, his amount of blinking and eye flaring went down about 2/3 in 1 week. I saw him one more time, that next week. And the mom has felt great about it since, and he hasn't had any issues since. So he was, that is the key. He did his homework 3 times a day.
That's the neuroplasticity.
Right,
So
right. So
that goes back to, he's activating the eyes, he's activating the breathing centers. They're all, so again, the receptors are firing. That fires the cellular level at a certain time period. Enough calcium comes in, the nucleus gets activated, makes proteins, and then the mitochondria gets activated, and the mitochondria makes, more stronger connections. Over a period of time, this happens. Over a period of time, the function improves.
for sure, for sure. So
That's a classic example of how he was able to change the firing of the nerve, change the cellular level through simple exercise, and then get neuroplasticity. It's real simple.
for sure. Yeah.
And here's the other thing: how Jeff he owns a gym. He's able to train the mom. And now through his relationship with the mom, he was able to add more value with that client because now she was very concerned about that eye blinking, the nystagmus, his focus, attention, all that stuff. And now Jeff was able to come in there and then become much more valuable to his client. That now they're looking at him not only are from the physical exercise for my health, but now the neurological component, and especially for his son, So now he is now when his referral list comes out, the mom is not just thinking about Jeff as the health and the training, but also the neurological component that she might know people that could that Jeff, other people that Jeff could help.
Definitely. Definitely.
And Jeff's now opened up now whole new opportunities into his business.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So I've been studying under Andrew for over 5 years and have really kind of started practicing about 2.5 years ago. And it's been a huge opportunity for me, both in the general population world, but also in the sports world. I coach high school basketball and youth football, and it's been a huge part of my growth as a coach as well.
Yeah, and I'll say this about Jeff. Um, any practitioner, whether it's whether it's someone who's into osteopathic like Jeff, um, physical therapist, chiropractor, acupuncture, occupational therapist, your naturopath doctor. It's just like anything else. It's just, I'm to share with you guys on the podcast. Yes, I've developed a course. Yes, I'm developing a software. I'm always reading and studying. I'm always reading and studying because I think the more that I understand how things work, and we're going to talk about this in mechanism, we're going to do a podcast on mechanism based therapies. The more you can understand things, it's kind of like if you were a basketball coach and you first started your first 5 years, you're running the same system, but now you take your 15th year or your 20th year into coaching, that same system and the same similar plays, you're looking at that just a little bit differently because of the experience that you have, because your experience improves your foundation. So in our world, we might be our experience with cases and then our experience just going over the information and studying. So I'm always kind of learning, trying to look at what we're doing and just kind of getting a more deeper level of it allows us to become, the more we have a good foundation, the better our creativity could be. The more we could think about a case and think maybe this could work. And that's what we want to, we're very much free thinkers and we're very creative. And I think it's based on reading and science that's out there and really good consciousness and energy. And that's what we're trying to bring to the table.
For sure. For sure. So great. So I think that wraps it up for our first podcast. Andrew, thanks so much for sharing everything on your knowledge of neuroplasticity, and we talked about hemisphericity and all that stuff. So that was awesome, man. Great job. And looking forward to next time.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you also for the value. Thank you for your own experience. And also thank you for working with you. Jeff is a great guy. I think anybody who is striving to do any type of work, and Jeff really put a lot of time into it and just is a pleasure to being able to teach. I'm very grateful for that opportunity and also grateful to develop a friendship with him and work with him on many fronts. He's just a great guy, great energy, and he does a lot of great work with his clients, with his regular clients, and with his athletes.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. And right back at you.
Thanks. All right. And we look forward to our next podcast with you guys.